think we are live.
We're live! All
Yes.
right.
This
So,
is the,
go ahead.
no, okay. This is the first of hopefully many um, Socionics videos with a Russian on it who actually knows quite a bit of stuff about Socionics. She even has a big book, don't you, Elena?
Oh, I have many big books in
And
Socionics.
Elena knows has actually read firsthand the Gulenko stuff that hasn't been badly translated on Wikisocion. But we're just digressing. We're now going to do an introduction to Socionics. So I'll hand it over to Alina.
Okay, well, thank you, Ben. So I will probably say a lot of things that you can read in all those many books and on all those websites. But the bottom line, I will try to be short, which sometimes it's hard for a declaring type like me. But I'll try to summarize what the socionics is. Socionics combines psychology and sociology together. It's a theory of information processing and of personality type, and it has not only just the information model for psyche, but also the model for interpersonal relationships. So it came from Jung's work on psychological types, and also from Anthony Kempinski's theory of informational metabolism.
That's how we
Uh,
spell him, like that.
yeah,
Anthony Kubinski.
and then exactly. So socionics is the improvement of Jung's theory on the personality type. And socionics uses 8 psychic functions in contrast to Jung's model, which uses only 4. And these functions process information at different levels of competency and interact with corresponding corresponding functions in another person. And so if you know how they interact, it will give you a knowledge, predictable reaction and impressions of another person. And in socionics, it is called a theory of intertype relationships. Socionics was developed. Do you have your flyer? Socionics was
Yes,
developed
here we go.
by Ausra Augustina Vichuti. We'll call her
Yeah,
Ausra Augusta.
yeah, I think I might need to speak so that it shows up, but that is about as clear as I can get it. We'll call her Aushra in this, but that's her name, folks. There
Yes,
we go.
and she was a Lithuanian professor of economist, sociologist, psychologist, and a dean of Vilnius Pedagogical University. And she developed the socionics in 60s and 70s. And the name socionics came from the word society. She believed that each personality type has a distinct purpose in society. And socionics can describe and explain your purpose in your life. So, Ben, do you want to talk about why she
Oh,
got interested in that,
yes.
maybe?
A legend that she was in an unhappy marriage and she wanted to know why. So she wanted to analyze her psyche and her husband's to work out why they had these communication difficulties.
Right. And later, hopefully, you and I, Ben, will talk about her
Yep,
works on duality
yep.
and her discoveries on that. So the main, I guess, the main idea of socionics is that information is divided into 8 categories in socionics, and they're called informational elements. And those elements become your psyche, which process all the received information using all those 8 psychological functions. Um, each social type has 2 rings, mental and vital, and each ring will have 2 blocks. and each block will have 2 functions. So total, you will have 4 blocks and 8 functions. And the placement of those 8 informational elements per type will correspond differently between functions, blocks, and those informational element, which will result in this difference of perceiving, accepting, processing, producing information, and that's how you will, will have a difference in values and thinking patterns, and even responses to certain arguments. Maybe you want to say something so it shows your chart.
Yeah, I've set it so that the chart will be on screen whilst you can talk about it. So it will remain on screen until you want it to go back on you. So yeah, we have, this is going to be tricky because it's reversed. This is the mental ring. And then the, oh, because it reverses, doesn't it? Yes, this, the vital ring. That way.
Yeah. So the socionics, so when you know your type and you know somebody else's type, then you can actually predict how your functions and informational elements correspond with that person. So are you unique? Are you like me? Why do I love you? Or why do I hate you? So when I know your type, I don't actually have to really know you, but just knowing your type, I can know you better than you know yourself, at least 80%, because I can predict your reaction to what I say, to what I do, and to how I behave. And I will know how you evaluate information that I'm telling you. So, so therefore, I can predict the relationships between you and me, or relationships between you and the group I'm interacting with. Would that be accurate, Ben, do you think?
Yes, because I've done sheets for all the different intertype relations. I've done all 16 sheets for, and this is actually for a future hangout with hopefully Jack Aaron and Jay McKee, otherwise aka EJ R&D or DJ R&D. So I have all the intertype relations matched out, and just for the moment, because it was briefly mentioned, we mentioned the jewels. And as luck would have it, Elena and I jewels. Although I'm not a C-tie and she's not a N-tie. But that is that row gives the jewel. But we're going a little bit, we need to sort of maybe go back to the introduction.
Yeah, we will go back to introduction because I think we are overwhelming everybody. So, Socionics does not solve any personal or any situational issues around you, like a psychology, for example. But Socionics uses psychology in that regard to understand and figure out the core of your personality. So, although types often do display similar values and even some life strategies or general behavior or the same humor, things like IQ, EQ, certain talents, certain behaviors, like physical abilities, for example, are not related to the type. So no type is inherently predisposed for success or failure in the life. All Socionic does is the figuring out the core of your personality and how you receive, process, and produce information. So, along with unborn psychological traits, sociotype does not change over life, and although your external behaviors, emotional states, and attitudes may. The basic difference, I guess maybe the main difference between Socionics and other typologies is that Socionics has a theory of intertype relations, And it's not just a typology of personality, but a typology of perceptual traits that define your relationships with others. And if you know your relationships with particular types, then you will know how beneficial, how pleasant some of them get, and how harmful the other might be to you. And in future webinars, hopefully, Ben will show you all his wonderful charts and wonderful graphs that he's so good at. And then we'll tell you all about relationships. There are actually 16 type relationships between you and all other people. And some of them are, as I said, good and beneficial. The other ones are very harmful, and stay away from them. So, Socionics and Myers-Briggs. I want to talk about that. Do you think we should, Ben?
Yeah, just for the moment, we can, both of them share these 8 functions.
Yeah.
So we have, if I just keep it on mine at the moment. So we have how sometimes they appear as these letters with Gulenko.
Yes.
So we have, he'll call FE, so extroverted feeling in MBTI and Jung. We call that ethics of emotions. So maybe, Elena, you could say, why do you think it's called ethics in Russian rather than emotion?
Because there are two, what was interesting is that when Aushra learned about Jung's theory, she changed some of his dichotomies from thinking into logic or feeling into ethics. And then she divided in those two different aspects, again, like emotions or relationships. And the reason for that is that Socionics doesn't tell you that if you are the F person, feeling, that means that you can't be a T person, because we all can think and we all feel, even if you are more logical than more ethical. And ethics is responsible for those kind of interpersonal stuff, I guess. So that was her rationale. That's why she changed it. I think she didn't change the intuition part in that, but she did change the sensing and rationality, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ben.
No, but that does make sense though, because there is a thinking component to ethics, and so especially from my point of view, but that's getting a little bit more in the weeds. But so if Gulenko would call that E for emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have FI, ethics of relations, and then maybe we could just say quickly what each one is. So ethics of emotions
Yeah.
would be
Emotions, and when we talk about emotion, it doesn't mean that the person is emotional in the way we all understand, like, oh, this person is whiny and complaining and all this kind of stuff. The ethics of emotion is really the ability to feel the emotions of others, but also to express right emotions at the right time, as well as to change somebody else's emotional state. For example, if somebody is not feeling well, the person who is really strong in ethics of emotion can sense that and have the ability to express his or her own emotions to change the emotional state of another person. Yeah.
That's interesting what you said, because when you were talking before about abilities, I tend to think that there are abilities associated with each element. So for instance, I would say that people who are FE dominants have
Mhm.
better people skills, have more interpersonal skills than people who have weaker FE.
Well, that's true, but again, even those who are weaker in FE, in ethics of emotions, can still experience emotions. When I talked about abilities, I probably was thinking about physical abilities, like sports abilities, or
Yeah.
something, that you're so gifted in one thing or the other, lifting 100 pounds a time or something, or
Mm.
running really fast, like those kind of extraordinary abilities that would not be tie into the type, but more sort of, I guess, genetic, like IQ, like, if you are a prodigy of some sort,
Mm.
any type could be a prodigy.
I, I think just for introverted sensation, Jung's belief was that introverted sensation types can be artistic, but most of them aren't.
Right.
So you saw that relationship between
Right.
introverted sensation and uh, painters. Um, so it was that for me, when talking about FE, is that I can read the emotions, but I'm not very good at changing the emotions
Exactly.
unless it's in certain things. If it's humor, maybe, but I'm not very good at knowing what to do.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
most likely you will start using your strength, like the structural logic, and try to find the rationale behind why this person is feeling the way he or she feels, and try to help from your strength. And that's the difference. But we all have the same um, aspects. They are located in different places, and that's the reason why you prefer to accept and process information the way you do, and I do it the other way, and
Right.
that's why we have a difference.
So
And I think Myers-Briggs is having a different approach, as far as I'm concerned, that it also came from Jung's theory, but it's fundamentally different. I think you, Ben, know more about Myers-Briggs than I do. You came from Myers-Briggs, right?
yeah, a little bit. One of the reasons I switched to Socionics is that I found the profile of the ESFJ to be offensive because it's
Thank
very
you.
yeah, it is offensive.
Yeah.
Um, it's just like a surface. It's just like one dimensional or no dimensional for the ESFJ in MBTI. Because in
Well,
Socionics,
it's just because MBTI is using this linear approach and not the systematic approach like Socionics does. And then, to be fair to Socionics, those who came to Socionics, they will discover how complex the system is and how much stuff it is in there, even per each type. And not to mention that Socionics was developed by logical types, and
yeah,
Myers-Briggs was developed by ethical types. Two housewives who love to, psychology and write novels and stuff, which is great. They got somewhere. It's just it's not as deep as Socionics.
yeah.
So
Um,
I think Myers-Briggs does not explain um, bigger bigger stuff like, okay, so I am this type, so what now? So it doesn't explain that extra step, what to do with that information, and Socionics does provide that.
um, I think both of the systems were about finding out what type someone is, and then saying, right, you're this type, therefore you should do this kind of job. Because it was both in a because it was for which it was to work out which types women are to put them into certain jobs for the war effort in World War II in America. And
Hmm.
the Soviet Union just had a wartime economy all the while, and so that was putting people into jobs.
Yeah.
Um, so I was wondering, just to uh, so we can recognize, to help people recognize when these elements are being used. What would someone who is really, really good at FE, what would they look like?
Well,
So someone
again,
says, wow, that's an FE
it's
problem.
very complex just because it comes from Freud. Um, he even said that we all have ego and superego. And what is superego? Is that super me that you want to appear externally for who you're not. So even if you see the FE strong person in front of you, you will not probably see the FE right away, but you will see the role function and the superego block that will show I am very effective. I am, thinking logically in terms of business logic. I can be practical and, that intuitive type that can be kind of cool and stuff.
Mm.
Um, so it only after some time when the superego gets tired because it's not who you are. And so you just have to hang out around that person and learn as much as you can. And then you'll see some crazy stuff.
But, hmm. But if generally, if you do see someone who's really nice and has got great people skills and just comes across as a nice person,
Well,
are they
yeah, then I mean,
probably going to
if
be
that's
FE?
yeah, I mean, if I'm in the right environment and doing what I really really love, then yes, you will see me inside out because I'm having so much fun. I remember being a marketing representative of a company at some conference, international conference, and guess what? All those clients were mine. They were taking my brochures like you can't believe it. So it's one of those things where you are in the right place and you actually love doing what you're doing at that moment, and then yeah, you'll see that.
Hmm.
So go to conference, Ben,
Yeah. No, I was just
and look
thinking
for
about
the marketing
a
person.
slight digression. There's a woman called Ruby Wax, and talking about, and she would an interview, and she used to interview people by getting to know them for a week,
Mm.
and really, and because she studied psychology, she was really good at showing, when she interviewed these celebrities, getting them to show more of them of their real selves. So she famously interviewed O.J. Simpson,
Oh.
and but what was and she would, and Drew Barrymore, and she would get to know them, befriend them for about 2 weeks before, and recorded it as she interviewed them. But
Mm-hmm.
what I thought was more interesting was she actually once had an interview program where it would be a recorded dinner. And so she would
Oh.
have the people relaxing with their friends, drinking, loosening their tongues, to maybe show more of the real person. So,
And that's a good strategy. Yeah.
so if we go back to, and then we can say, just have a quick thumbnail sketch of, we'll probably only really have enough time to go through the elements at the moment for the rest of this part, because there's about 20 minutes left. I think you said that you have to go in about 20 minutes.
Okay.
Is that right?
Yeah, but didn't we want to have these webinars for 50 overwhelmed? So maybe we can do the other
Okay.
one tomorrow on
Well,
elements. What do you
so
think?
so far we've just done the introduction, and we're sort of doing the we're just sort of doing thumbnails for each element.
Okay.
I mean, we've not gone super in depth into FE. We're just sort of like saying little bits about it.
Yeah, we just said a little bit about it.
Yeah, yeah. So we could say a little bit about FI, which Gulenko does with an R, for relations, and I actually like that code he uses.
Right.
Oh,
And
the
ethics of
R, ethics of
relationships
relation.
is, yes, it's ethics of relations. It's it's the introverted aspect that has the ability to understand the relationships between people, how they relate to each other, what are the attitudes. They are the ones who can actually build psychological distance, whether to, close that distance or do the opposite of it. Um, And yeah, so any type of relationships between humans, that's what this ethics of relationships is doing. What's the next one?
Um, oh, we could briefly say when it's really weak, what does it look like if someone's, say, we'll touch on it later, FI polar, but when someone's weak at
Well,
FI,
there are two kind of weak, right? There is
yeah,
weak that is very conscientious type
yeah,
stuff that you like vulnerable. Weak is like
yeah,
where you're weak and you don't want to have it under any circumstances, under any type of sauce, even if it's sweet sauce,
yeah,
you don't want it in any form or shape. And the other types will have it weak, but it's so valued that they need
yeah,
that type of ethics of relationships externally to be imposed on them, and they will love it. So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
just there are two weaknesses.
I was just sort of showing that we can sort of show the importance of each element by what happens when it's in the vulnerable position for each one. So, for instance, when someone is vulnerable FI, they have a problem knowing what is and is not appropriate in each
Exactly.
relationship, and so it can be pretty bad.
It goes into extreme. It's either one or the other, and it's never adequate. Just because if there is a new situation, vulnerable does not know how to behave. So when you have the ethics of relationships being your vulnerability, um, so you can be very inadequate. You can
Yeah,
say very inappropriate things, or
yeah,
you can behave like completely distancing yourself from people completely, 100%. That's another extreme.
yeah. So just so that people can have an example of what that looks like, if we think of the FI vulnerable would be the ESTP and the ENTP people. And when talking about ethics of emotions, when people completely lack FE in terms of when it's vulnerable, that would be the NITE and the SITE.
Right,
What in the MBTI INTJ and the MBTI ISTJ.
right.
We would, but so that's just that for the moment. Now we're going to go on to the third one, practical thinking, TE.
The practical thinking is that logic, business logic, we call it in
Yeah,
socionics, and that also kind of processes information in anything that can give me a benefit, or what's the value in this information, practical value. They are not up to discovering potential theories or something abstract. They want to think and talk about the beneficial and practical material things around them. So if you have somebody whose strength is that, you will see them probably in banks or some sort of business development type roles, investments, anything that they can apply their skill and get something practical and back. And usually they're workaholics too. They
um,
work a lot.
um, Carl Jung said that well, he didn't actually say TE DOMs. He sort of used the phrase extroverted thinking types and
Hmm.
introverted thinking types. Says that the extroverted thinking type will also use introverted thinking, and the introverted thinking type will also use extroverted
Hmm.
thinking.
Hmm.
And Kant said that pretty much the same thing. Otherwise, you would have theories going off into space, not grounded in
Exactly.
reality. And if it was
Exactly.
too much grounded in reality with no theory, you wouldn't be able to interpret anything or to make order of
Exactly.
anything.
But it's
So,
just that that particular type, like for example, LIE, they will have the leading function TE, but where's TI if you think about it? Yes, it's also in the very strong block, but it's undervalued. So of course it's
yeah,
always on the background, that structural thinking, the big picture thing. But what's the value? It's that
yeah,
immediate practical thinking. What's my
yeah.
benefit?
So just for folks who are new to this, LIE is logical, intuitive, extrovert. So the TNI, the extroverted thinking type with auxiliary introverted intuition. So
Yes.
so just to what does TE vulnerable look like?
Those people will always complain about money, meaning they always will say, I want money, but they won't know
Oh,
how to earn it.
we'll just
Or,
say I'll just say which two types they are. They are the Psi-Phi, so which is the ISFJ and MBTI, which is the ISFP in Socionics. The NIFI, which is the INFJ and MBTI, the INFP in Socionics. So the Psi-Phi and the NIFI are now you can work it out, folks, by it basically it's oh, I'll do that in the next one about how you work out when someone's vulnerable.
yes.
Uh, but so yeah, so those two. So if you think of that, folks, so MBTI people think about the ISFJ and the INFJ when Elena talks about this next bit about TE vulnerable.
Yeah, so the TE vulnerable, they will have issues in um, saving money or spending money, or they will go in, again, in adequate modes of, oh, okay, well, I see this jacket, leather jacket, and it costs $400. This person will not know where to start comparing, whether it's an appropriate price to pay or not, is it overpriced or not. At the same time, this person may go into the debt of overspending on something like that, and just will be very inadequate. Because again, in those people with vulnerable TE, they have very strong emotions, and they will be driven by emotions to do that kind of purchase, for example. So yeah.
Well, do they have a problem putting things into practice, implementing things, say implementing a plan, getting each step right?
Well, they don't like planning to begin with, just because they're rational
Uh,
types. And so, yeah, if you talk about practical plans, but what kind of practical plans? You know, you ask my friend SEI, and she said, I'm very practical. Well, yeah, she's sensing, she knows what the healthy food to cook, how much of that food to cook, what to buy, what kind of clothes to buy, and how to make a house comfortable and cozy. Well, yeah, she's practical in some sense, but she was never ambitious enough to go and work 24 hours a day and earn all that money. Yeah, so she just doesn't have that interest. Although she wants money,
yeah,
but she doesn't know how
right.
to get it.
I mean, I personally think that sometimes it can be hard to tell the difference between sensing and extroverted thinking because
Mm-hmm.
both are rooted in reality. So we'll come on
Right.
to that later on when we sort of specifically define the elements. We're just sort of doing like a thumbnail sketch. So at the moment we have TI, which
Yeah,
is I'm
TI
a
is a structural logic. It's
or
the
just
kind of,
logic.
well, it is the structural logic, not the business logic,
Yeah,
but the structural, the formal logic. Let's put
yeah,
it this way. I call it
yeah,
iron logic. There is no argument against the iron logic.
yep,
And
yep.
yeah, so the person will be very strong in analyzing big stuff. Let's put it this way, global stuff on the global scale. And somebody who is weak in that function or the aspect will kind of avoid the rules, or will be inadequate in following the rules, rebel against the rules, or kind of that
So,
thinking will be a problem.
yeah, so those two types, folks, will be the ESFP and the ENFP because they are FI auxiliary, so they are TI vulnerable because
Yes.
Fi and Ti are both introverted rational elements, so they suppress each other. Although Elena doesn't like that word suppress,
Yes.
Carl Jung uses it, and so it's how I can sort of get to the vulnerable. So when someone is Ti vulnerable, are they? Would you say they're adverse to speculation? And so when
Probably they just appear to be chaotic. Like to me, who is weak in the TI, but I want it externally, and I try to control myself internally. That hey, I have to be stable. Those people don't even try to, or they try to, but it doesn't happen, and it's just a lot of. I feel a lot of chaos like around me, just so much stuff that it's not structural, like their behavior is not structural, or thinking is all over the place, and it's um it could
yeah,
be hard
the,
sometimes.
a couple of days ago, Elena mentioned something easy to me, interesting to me about when you have weak but valued Ti in say the ESFJ and the ENFJ. It's not as weak as it appears because they can be good at TI. It's just they have difficulty articulating it unless they're in the presence of their jewel. Or is that correct? And so, and oh yeah, you mentioned something about you feel you can write better, use TI better in writing than in speaking. Would that be
Yes,
fair?
because when I write, I actually have time to think about what I wrote, because I do, when I write, I do rewrite many times, because I go back and I read what I wrote and then I hate it most of the time. So I have to go and correct my thinking pattern. So when I write, I think I'm more rational versus when I say something, especially if there is a thought requirement, then I need to kind of slow down and think about it. So yes, if you
The,
ask me on the spot, create the rule of something, I will never be able to do that, although I will want to. I'll need to go back, think about it, write it down, and then say, okay, I confirm it. This is what my rule is on something. But I'm not the rule creator. I'll follow the rules.
will it also be that when you're communicating, you're thinking about the other person and you're reading their emotions, and so that is
Right.
that has primacy in your thinking is the FE is in the foreground in terms of I'm reading the emotions, I'm the feelings, but when you're on your own and you're writing
Right.
something, that
Then I
isn't a
use other
consideration.
functions. Right. I use other functions to do
Yeah.
that. So, okay, we have about maybe two,
Right.
3 minutes. Gotta go.
Okay. So if we quickly say, if we don't bother going into the poet, but if we say, we can quickly go, SE force or volitional sensing.
Okay, so
There.
those guys are very uh, they may appear to be very intimidating to some, and
Yes.
they are very territorial. They know what they want. They have the ability to understand and assess the territorial placement of objects and people. Who is where, in what position, and they are ready to attack or they are ready to protect. They are the ones who are very good at protecting their own interests or imposing their own interests on others, meaning some of it could be forcing you to do some work, for example, and or they will tell you what you should be doing or how you can stay active. Um, Typically, those people are very immobilized in general, so they are ready to act and strike at any point. And they appear to be tough, especially those who value that kind of function. And those who are weak, they will appear kind of more like in the victim type behavior, asking for that type of um, accent on, like imposition on them. They will provoke for that behavior. So those who are weak and want it, they will appear like victims. the others who are weak, but the function is vulnerable, you will see complete opposite from the victim type behavior, like the Robespierre, the LII. Those guys will be stubborn, rebel, and actually will become cold and distant, and there's nothing you can do. They'll just say opposite from everything that person is trying to make them do. So yeah.
Yeah, so that's the little irony of the LIIs, that they can be very willful if it conflicts with a strong logical ethical value
Right.
of so if you think about I tend to call it the Jefferson rather than the Robespierre. So yeah, that's so if we, because we've not got much time left, if you talk a little bit about SI, so
Yes,
introverted
SI,
sensing.
introverted sensing is the ability to adapt to the environment, create in that particular environment the most comfortable atmosphere, physically and emotionally. It's the ability to understand the beauty, comfort, and coziness created for your own body as well as for others around you. And yeah, and just enjoy every single thing your body is enjoying, like pleasures and sensuality and beauty. Everything is dancing, and those who are weak in that aspect but vulnerable, they will not want to think or talk about health and beauty and their body and everything, but at the same time they can't lose the control of it. They want to control it. Oh, you buy me a new shirt, I have to approve it. Oh, do you think it's a good shirt? Yes, it's a good shirt. Oh, how do you know? Maybe the shirt sucks. Well, I know, just trust me. No, I don't trust you. But so they don't trust themselves and they don't trust others. But if somebody else, like with the extroverted sensing, will just kind of shovel in their face, this is the shirt, just wear it, put it on. So that was the story. And those who are weak in the SI but really want it, like, ILE, they can eat
ENTP?
anything,
Yeah,
especially if
ENTP,
it's
yeah,
good.
highly.
Yes, especially if it's something good and healthy. I think they just eat all the time, and like LII, they will just want somebody to just take care of them in that sense, make them comfortable, relaxed, safe, and
Yep.
remove the aggression out of the communication. So that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
I
We
gotta
can
go.
talk more about that later. So in the
All
next,
right.
oh, you've not got time for any and NI. Okay,
No,
we
I
can.
gotta go.
We'll leave people hanging. We'll talk about.
Yes, we'll
Okay,
continue
she has
next
to go.
next time. Okay, bye guys.
Okay, the best two elements are next. Bye bye.
Yes. Bye.
Bye bye. I will stop the broadcast.